It's late September and the dahlias are beginning to look a little bit past their best, and even the bedding plants are beginning to look scruffy and overgrown. In this episode, Geoff's going to talk about the dahlias that have done well this year. Before he does that, we're going to show you some clips from our visit to Harrogate show, and also when we went to see the dahlia trial beds at Golden Acre Park in Leeds.
In mid-September, I start to think about what I would like to grow next year, and I found that going to Harrogate Flower Show, Autumn Flower Show, stimulates some new ideas. People bring along the fruit and veg and the flowers that they've grown to show. People compete for prizes like who can grow the biggest onion, but more important to me, it's where the National Dahlia Society have their autumn show. And it was here that for the very first time I saw a new dahlia called Octopus Sparkle.
I would say you need to have one or two that are a bit different.
Yes.
And not just the really gorgeous. Because of the very hot summer, there weren't as many exhibits as we normally see. Geoff didn't see any new varieties that particularly impressed him. As a result of this, the following day he dragged me off to Golden Acre Park to look at the dahlias in the trial bed.
Today I'm in Golden Acre Park in Leeds, which is in the north of England. Every year the UK National Dahlia Society have a competition to see which dahlias would be good for use in exhibitions. Here's a list of all the dahlias that won the trials over the past 30 odd years. They arranged them in different categories. All the waterlilies are at this side, all the mini decoratives there. I come here every year to see if there are any new dahlias that I fancy growing in my garden. I don't grow for exhibition myself, but you can see some of the best new varieties around. I'll mention some of the ones that really attract me, and I've got to start with this one. Rossendale Donald. Look at that. This is a miniature bowl raised by somebody called S.J. Milner. It's not got a proper name yet. This is a nice collarette called Tracy's Comet. I'm rather attracted to this waterlily variety. It's called Sennon Rose. This is another pretty collarette called Amgard Margaret. Blighton Burnt Orange is a nice colour. This is a giant decorative. It's called Sherwell Hannah J. Now this yellow medium semi-cactus is called Eastwood Essex. I would imagine that it'll be quite well up in the markings because it was winning prizes at Harrogate show, I noticed. It's got very strong stems. A very nice medium decorative called Kingsley Christine. I like that one, I like the form. Now this is a variety that I will probably want to grow in my garden. It's called Octopusy Sparkle. I saw it at Harrogate show yesterday. It certainly won't win the prize for exhibition because I don't think there would be a class it would fit into. But for a garden display and for interest for people, I think it's very good. The flowers are very varied. Compare that one with that one, with that one. Having seen them all, the one I saw first was the best one. Rossendale Donald, that's the one I would really want in my garden. Back home now, and I'm looking at the latest seedling to come into bloom. I was thinking that it was quite nice, but having seen Rossendale Donald, I'm afraid that this one's not really in the same league, is it? I think that this seedling's quite nice, but I would guess that the purists would say that it's neither a decorative nor a cactus type. It's in between. But I'll definitely keep it and grow it next year. It's a nice shape. It's the 19th of September. We've just had quite a drop of rain, and it's a good time to look for all the varieties that have done well. If they can stand up to the rain, they're on my hit list. There's Wanda's Capella, an absolutely brilliant dahlia. It stood up to the rain and kept on producing huge flowers like these all summer long. Another variety that's done pretty well this year is Cleo Lane, a medium cactus. This is Rycroft Helen. Again, a variety that's produced lots of nice flowers, and it stands up to the rain. Another one that's caught everybody's eye throughout the summer is this one. It's called Hillcrest Firecrest. Here's another example. I very rarely have to cut dead flowers off this one. They seem to last for ages. One that I've really enjoyed growing this year is called Twilight Boy. Beautiful colour. Ferncliff Cameo has been magnificent throughout the summer. Look at all the flowers on it. In general, I'm not keen on the fimbriated varieties because they don't stand up to the rain. But this one is called Maggie C, and it's done a lot better than the other fimbriateds. This is my first year of growing Tracy Diane. It's a sport off Ruskin Diane, I think. It's a good variety. I'll grow it again. This miniature deck is called Barbary Vulcan. It's another one that's done really well. Whitterman Superba is superb. I grow it every year. I wouldn't be without it. As usual, the yellow ball called Rycroft Delight at the back of the border has delivered the goods. AC Abbey's had a good year. It stood up well in the sun, and now it's standing up well to the rain too. This one's Golden Impact. It's been one of my favourite dahlias for years. I always struggle to keep it over winter. It doesn't produce very good tubers, but I hope you can agree with me that it's worth the effort. And finally, this is Sunshine Paul. It's been delivering a display like this throughout the year. Although opening the garden for charity does put me under a lot of pressure, it's a good thing in a way because it forces me to make sure I keep on top of the deadheading and making sure that the garden looks good. Knowing that a few hundred people will be looking round the garden certainly focuses the mind. But certainly when the open weekend's over, my motivation does take a bit of a dive. But what does motivate me now is starting to think about how I'm going to produce some seed to grow myself next year. I find a group of dahlias, different varieties but with similar shapes, and I remove the petals to expose the pollen to the bees. So in a row here I've got 5 decorative sorts, all round. This one's a miniature decorative. The next two are described as large poms. This small one is an actual true pompon, and then another mini decorative. As each bloom fades, I remove the petals like this. I leave just a few petals so that the bees can spot it. Then the bee moves on to the next flower, hopefully transferring the pollen from the previous flower to this one, and hopefully fertilizing it so it will produce seeds later in the season. Talking of seeds, some more of the seedlings that I planted this year are coming out. This one's a pretty colour, but I don't think the form's up to much. I can't imagine that I'll want to keep this one for next year. This one's a cactus. It's alright, but it's not got much depth to it. This is the second bloom I've had on this little plant. It's very short, which is good in a way. It'll be nice at the front of the border, and the petals reflect quite nicely around the back, so I'll hang on to this one. And the one that I said previously wasn't either a cactus or a decorative, it does seem to have matured into more of a semi-cactus. So this is another one I'll keep for next year. It's the 21st of September. It's the time of year where I like to measure all my new varieties to see how tall they've grown. I mark up a cane. So this new variety, which is a barberry, has grown to 5 foot tall. In fact, it's called Barbary Vulcan, and the guy who gave it to me has marked it as being 4.5 feet tall. That's how tall it grew in his garden last year. Well, it's grown taller for me. That's often the case. Mine seem to grow taller than they grow in other places. I don't know whether it's the soil, the conditions, or what. So I've marked it on my spreadsheet. It's grown to 5 foot, and I particularly like this variety. It's done very well, so I've decided that I want 3 of them next year. Now normally I go around and also measure the existing varieties, the ones that have been growing for a few years, and try to refine my measurements. But it's been such a weird year. For example, this is Amy Kay. I hope you can see that this one's grown to 6 feet tall, and yet here's another example of the same variety. This one's only grown to 4 feet tall. It must be something to do with the conditions this year. It's been so hot and dry. I'm conscious that quite a few of the varieties they've been telling you about have been yellow ones. Perhaps it's just been that sort of year. Yellow's done well in the sun, I don't know. But here's another one, and this is a really good one called Westerton Harry. It's a medium decorative. It wins lots of prizes in exhibition. But here it is, late September, still looking good in the garden. Now here's a little variety I've been growing for years. It's called Piper's Pink. I don't suppose the form would win it any prizes, but it's a lovely colour, and you get loads of flowers. Highly recommend this one. Here's another variety that I've been growing for several years. It's a large cactus variety, salmon pink. It's called Hollyhill Chloe. It's beautiful form. I'd like to grow more of it, but it's not the easiest to keep over winter, unfortunately, so I never have more than a couple. This variety is called Happit Austria Flag. It got lots of comments when we opened for the public. People like the bicolour. This small decorative is called Formby Art. It was raised in Australia. It looks very nice with the little pink tinges on the tips of the petals. It's what would be described as a good garden variety. It wouldn't win prizes because of the form. The only trouble with it is that the stems are a little bit weak, and it does have a tendency to drop its petals like that. But it's certainly very pretty.
Geoff asked me which dahlias I liked best. I don't really know why he's asking me now, because in a few months we'll be digging them up. Anyway, this is one of my favourites. This one's called Maxime, and I like this because I do like the ones with lots of different spikes of colour in them. There is a type of dahlia called an anemone one, which in our house we call it a pincushion one. We haven't got any to show you because Geoff doesn't like it. Anyway, this year I finally worn him down, and hopefully next year we might grow a few. Another one I like is this variegated pink one called Happit Elegance. Again, I like it because it's got lots of splashes of colour. Just been trying to get rid of this for the last 2 or 3 years, but each time I plead and beg and it's still in the garden, and I still like it. It's very nice to have all the deep blooms with lots of petals, etc. but this one, called Holly Hill Spider Woman, is definitely different, and I certainly like this one. I probably mentioned before that I can never tell where Geoff is in the garden, and the only way that you can tell is when flowers start whizzing through the air.
I do understand why people like the stripy sorts. I'd be quite happy to have a stripy one in the garden if it was nicely formed, but this particular variety I'm afraid isn't. The petals aren't symmetrical, and the other thing about it is that it's very badly stained when it rains. And like many of the larger flowering varieties, as the petals start to come out, the ones at the back can start dying off before the ones at the front have been fully formed. Yeah, I know, I'm being pedantic, but when there are thousands and thousands of varieties to choose from, why bother with one that's not quite up to the mark? This little yellow cactus is the latest seedling to come into bloom. I think it's rather nice. And this is about the third bloom we've had on this pink cactus. It's actually a fimbriated one, if you can see. The petals are split at the end. That one's okay too. On the other hand, I'm not going to bother keeping this bronze cactus. As you can see, the petals go all over the place. It looks a bit like me on a windy day. This is a seedling of mine that I sowed in 2019. I think it's rather pretty. The yellow and the bronze contrast, and it makes it look quite nice. However, I don't suppose the purists would like the fact that some of the petals on some of the blooms get white tips. So I won't be entering that at the Leeds trials. Those of you who've watched previous videos of mine might remember me talking about high debut. It's a very slow starter, and I often wonder if it's going to flower at all, but I hope you can see that when it does come out, it's worth the wait. In the last couple of years, this one called Westerton Ella Grace has become one of my favourites. As Heather will tell you, I'm not usually one for subtlety, but this one is beaut. I've not shown you my pot tubers recently. Here they are. There's about 150 plants here, all in little pots. They'll produce a tuber at the end of the season, but I don't let them flower this year. They'll be okay for next year. Holly Hill Black Widow is very dark, particularly towards the centre of each bloom. I don't suppose it's quite water lily enough to be classified as a water lily, so it's probably a decorative in the UK, but I love it, whatever it is. On the other hand, Sandy and Melody is a genuine water lily, and very pretty for it. Here's another lovely water lily sort. This one's Summit Festival. But the water lily that wins more prizes than any other is probably this one. It's called Gwyneth. Now, I told you about Maggie C, a fimbriated variety that stands up to the weather. Well, the other fimbriated that I really like is this one. It's called Marlene Joy. I grow it every year. It's dead easy to keep, dead easy to split in the tubers, and it produces a wonderful display every summer. If you want a reliable variety with large flowers, this one, Clearview Jonas, is a good bet. Looking at it closely, it's quite similar to the one that I've just grown from seed, isn't it? In the last video, I showed you how some of my plants have been attacked by red spider mite. They suck the moisture out of the leaves. They go stripy like this. I've sprayed it, and you can see there that there's one branch that's not got any blight on it. But unfortunately, the rest of the plant seems to be covered in it, and you can see the effect that it's had on the flowers. They're not strong enough to hold the heads up. So next year I'm going to have to look out for red spider mite and try to stop it spreading before it's too late. Now, I spoke earlier about Rycroft Delight being a reliable tall growing dahlia. Well, there's another one that I can recommend too. It's called Citizen. As you can see, it's grown right up into the tree. It must be at least 10 feet tall. And there are still some blooms to come up there. The lady who raised this miniature cactus variety called Western Melody kindly gave me a tuber of it a few years ago. It's now become one of my staples. Yet, it's never been on the market so far as I've known. As far as I know, I've never seen it in any catalogue. I don't understand why, to be honest. Another variety that was late to start for me but has now caught up is this one, Rycroft Huntsman. Very vibrant colour. And this one's about 9 feet tall. I showed you Hamari Gold in the previous video, but here it is again. Cracking flower. Very large too. While I was talking about water lily dahlias, I forgot to mention this one, and I shouldn't have done. It's called Vivian Russell. Last year it was about 4 feet tall, but this year in the sun it's grown to 6 feet tall, and I like it. Do you like this one? It's called Sunshine Zest. It's the very first seedling that I ever grew, and I'm still growing it because it's very nice. Now, the dominant male giraffe at Chester Zoo is called Dalmar, even though it's spelt Dagmar. Well, this dahlia's got the same name. I don't know whether it's pronounced Dagmar or Dalmar, but I like it. J.S. Dorothy Rose has been flowering like this for weeks now. If you look closely, the light pink petals have dark pink stripes, which gives it a nice effect. A dahlia that's quite common in the UK is called Western Spanish Dancer. You see it in lots of people's gardens. But at this time of the year, the stems get a bit weak, so it goes a bit floppy. Fortunately, I've got one that's quite similar really. It's called Crazy for Jessie. And it's got stronger stems, even though it grows taller than Western Spanish Dancer. Now this red water lily is called Edwin Sunset. So far we've been having a bad summer with this variety. I think that it's been too hot for it, and so we've not had many flowers. But now it's cooled off, it's coming into its own. So I'm going to try it again next year. A variety that lots of people comment about is Blackjack. It's another one that's had a relatively poor summer, presumably because of the hot conditions. But it's also another one that's now coming into its own. Holly Hill Jitterbug's been producing displays like this all throughout the summer. Lots and lots of flowers. Finally, for the people who like the open-centred single varieties, I can recommend one or two. This one is called HS Happy Wink. This is another one I like, it's called Moonfire. And finally, I can recommend this star-shaped dahlia. It's called Hadrian's Midnight. It was raised by Halls of Hedden. It's quite tall for a single. It grows to about 4 feet tall, but it has lots of flowers. Well, if you've reached the end of this video, I congratulate you. You're either gluttons for punishment or you love dahlias like I do. By the time I make another video, it'll be the end of the season. Will there have been a frost by then? Who knows? But bye for now.